Good afternoon, everybody. It's Beth from Beehive Yarns, and you're watching Chats from the Hive. This is episode 2. I just want to start out by saying a huge thank you to everybody who watched my very first episode. I was completely blown away by how many people have watched it and how many people left comments on my first video. I think, as I mentioned in that video, I wasn't necessarily intending to publish it. Felt quite nervous entering the world of podcasting, but I'm so glad I did, and I've had so many lovely words of encouragement, so thank you so much if you've reached out. It really means a lot. And also a slight apology because I know that I haven't been able to respond to every comment on the video. I started out quite well, but appeared to have tailed off, as you'll hear in a few minutes. We've had a really busy last few weeks, so yeah, I have read every single one, and if I haven't replied then I do apologise because I really do appreciate it. So thanks everybody. So yeah, what have you all been doing? I've had a really busy, I think it's 4 weeks since the very first episode, maybe 3.5. Since then, schools have gone back at the beginning of September. We're now sort of well into the autumn term of school. And yeah, it's been busy at Beehive. So I'll tell you a little bit about what we've been up to. And then I do have some knitting and a bit of crochet to share today. So right, getting on with it. What we've been up to. So since we last spoke, Beehive as a business has kind of entered our very busiest time of year, really. We kind of call it silly season. So we're moving into obviously Halloween and then Christmas. So the last few weeks I've been dyeing up some Halloween boxes. So I did some countdown boxes this year, 13 days of Halloween, and the theme was coven. So it was everything witchy. And I absolutely loved putting those together, and they are all now either with their recipients or on their way to their recipients, ready to open in October. And they were an absolute joy to make. Really up my alley. In fact, there's probably quite a lot of pumpkin and witch related discussions in this week's podcast. So yeah, they kept me really busy because I guess a little bit like a yarn advent calendar. They're all mini skeins and they're all individually wrapped, and they take an awful lot of processing. And I always have some help, so I had some help from my mum. And it was great. So I'm glad to say that they're now gone and they're all winging their way to their intendeds. So that was a big piece of work. And then off the back of that, we had Yarndale Festival last weekend. So hard to believe that this time last week I was setting up our stand at Yarndale. So for those of you who don't know, Yarndale is a really large yarn festival and wool festival here in the UK. It's not far from where I live. It's about an hour's drive away, so in North Yorkshire. And it's a really atmospheric festival. I actually had a stand opposite a pen of sheep this year. So there's 2 rams and they were absolutely adorable, and they were my neighbours for the whole weekend. And it's just got a lovely atmosphere. It's my 5th year vending at Yarndale. And as you can imagine, a sort of 2-day festival, it takes an awful lot of work in terms of preparation, setting the stand up, unpacking when you get back and things like that. So I'm still on a wind down from last weekend, really, in terms of Yarndale. And it was so lovely to meet so many of you guys there as well. I had so many people come up to me and mention that they'd watched the podcast or kind of encouraged me to keep going with the podcast. I met other podcasters who were there taking footage themselves. So it was just a brilliant, real community event, and I had a lovely weekend. I have come back with a bit of a sore throat and a bit of a bug, hence I'm a bit croakier than normal, but it was worth it, it was well worth it. And I had lots of sort of shenanigans. I'm sure they'll come up over the course of the episode in terms of just daft things that I did during Yarndale. And I do have a little teeny bit of stash acquisition to share from Yarndale, and I'll leave that towards the kind of end of the podcast. And now we're back and we're straight into Advent season. So obviously not obviously at all, but Advent calendar is a huge part of our dyeing year. We've done, I think, 4 years or even 5 years now of Advent calendars. And they are a huge undertaking. And I know a lot of dyers talk about that, and I'm not going to whinge about it because I love my job. I'm certainly not going to moan about how much work I've got to do. But yeah, we're super busy, full speed ahead on Advents now, ready to get those out either at the end of this month or beginning of November if you're in the UK. And yeah, that's fun as well. And the theme of my Advent this year is, it's called A Year at the Cabin, and it's kind of loosely based on the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. So even if you haven't read The Little House on the Prairie or The Little House in the Big Woods, it doesn't matter, because you know it's a really universal theme of a kind of cosy cabin surrounded by nature. But I am kind of taking bits and pieces from those books, particularly The Little House in the Big Woods, which is my very favourite of those books. So again, it's really fun. It's just nice to kind of immerse myself in that world really, and come up with colourways. And I can't show you any, of course, but I have actually got a big pile of them over in that corner of the room, and they're all very nature themed. And a yarn advent calendar, for those of you who don't know, operates very much, you know, very similarly to other advent calendars that are available, where you open something every day through December up until Christmas Eve. And in this case it's mini skeins, and you open one a day, and the theme, as I said, is A Year at the Cabin, and that's meant that I've been able to split those 24 mini skeins down into 4 seasons. So I've got like a season of spring where there's 6 mini skeins, and that will kind of move on into summer where there's another 6 mini skeins, and so on through the year. So it's something that I'm really enjoying, and I hope I'm not giving too much away if you have signed up for the advent calendar. Hopefully that's a bit of a sneak peek rather than anything giving anything away. I'm sure it's what you're expecting. So yes, that's what I'm up to. My hands, I don't know if you can see, covered in dye. I've been dyeing this morning. I've been scrubbing them in the bath prior to filming this podcast. I thought, shall I put nail varnish on? I thought, what's the point? I'm going to be dyeing wool again in the morning. I'm a very messy dyer. I do wear gloves, but the gloves that I have at the moment have got a hole in these 2 fingers. So these fingers were like bright red a few minutes ago. So yeah, that's me, I'm afraid. Right, where shall we go from here? I want to tell you what I've been knitting and working on, but first of all, I thought I'd mention what I'm wearing. So this is a sample knit. So I think if you watched the last episode, you'll have heard me talking about a wonderful team of sample knitters and crocheters that I have, who sort of make samples for shows. And I have a new yarn base launching this month. A little bit more on that in a minute. And this is knit from that. So this is called Chalet Days, and the designer is Samantha Guerin. Now, last episode I was wearing another design by Samantha called the Salty Air Tee. I had lots of lovely comments about that. I hope you all went away and bought the pattern from Samantha because it's beautiful. And this is another one of her patterns. So this is DK or worsted weight, and as you can see, it's a colour work yoke, really striking and simple. And yeah, just a kind of plain body. And this is knit in my brand new yarn base, which is called Folklore. So I don't think it had a name last time we spoke. I remember holding up some skeins to the camera, but it didn't have a name. So I've got Folklore DK and Folklore 4-ply, and that will be coming a bit later on this month. I did launch it at Yarndale, and people enjoyed it so much I ran out of several colours, and I just have not had time to re-dye them this week. So although I have a shop update this Sunday, the 2nd of October, I won't have the Folklore yarn for that update. I want to do a nice big launch, and so therefore I'm going to wait until I'm fully stocked up, and that'll be either the middle of October or the end of October. So trust me, it's coming soon. But yeah, it's a bit of a departure in terms of name, because if you know anything about Beehive yarns or you've bought from us before, you'll know that all of our yarn bases are named after film stars and singers from the 1960s who had beehive hair. So we've got Audrey, we've got Bridget Bardot, the Ronettes, we've got Cilla Black, all different people named after 60s icons who I absolutely adore. But for this base, I couldn't quite think of somebody who fit, if that makes sense. And secondly, it's such a big it's a different base for us. As I explained last time, it's it's British wool, it's non-superwash, and it felt very much like a brand new product. So yeah, I went with a brand new name, so it's called Folklore DK and Folklore 4-ply. So this is knit out of the DK, and I absolutely love it. I'm not wearing any, you don't need to know this, but I'm not wearing anything underneath it, and it's still lovely and soft next to the skin. So yeah, give it a go when it comes out. I think you'll like it. And I do have a couple of other items in that yarn to show you as well. So this was, I should say actually, the sample knitter who knit this is a lady called Marina. I won't share her full name because she probably wants to keep that private, but Marina's made some beautiful colour work items for me, and you know, big shout out to her for doing such a cracking job with this. And then the next one, try and hold this up, there we go, is the Maya sweater. I'm sorry, I'm not doing a very good job of showing that in the camera, am I? But hopefully you get the idea, and you may recognise this pattern. It's in the autumn edition of Pom Pom Quarterly. So if you read Pom Pom magazine, or if you might have seen it advertised on Instagram or something like that, this pattern is called Maya, and it's in there. And again, it's been knit out of our Folklore DK, and it was knit by a sample knitter called Sarah. So if you're watching, Sarah, thank you so much. Amazing job as always, and I love this. And both of these sweaters were on my stand hanging up at Yarndale. I didn't wear any knitwear this Yarndale. I was quite warm and I just kind of wore my normal clothes, but I had these hanging up as samples on my stand, and they had lots of people come in and have a squish and things like that, and several people going away and buying the yarn to make their own, which is wonderful, isn't it? Because I just think if you see something like this and you want to go away and make it, then that's your own version, then that's really, really lovely. So yeah, so 2 sample knits there. So full disclosure, I didn't make these, but I wanted to share them because they're just so lovely. And in terms of the Folklore yarn, I won't dwell on it too much again today. However, I will do, when it is time to launch it, I will probably do like a video on Instagram, or even maybe another video here, talking through and showing you the full colour palette. So I've got 16 different colours. They all match with each other. And as I said, some of them are out of stock, so yeah, it'll be really good to show you those. So over to me. So since we last spoke, I have a finished object, and this is it. So this is the Lorinda shawl. I want to get that lovely pattern in. It's quite a big shawl, but hopefully you can see there at the bottom. It's got beautiful texture. And if you remember, when I showed this last time, I think I was only maybe, I don't know, that much through. So I've knit this quite quickly, really. It was such an enjoyable knit. I really, really loved making it. It's kind of right up my alley, really. Sort of nice textured stitches. Oops. In kind of sections, so you never get bored of doing one particular thing, because you always move on to another section. There's fisherman's rib. There's bobbles, there's garter stitch, so you just keep going, really, and it's really, really enjoyable. So yeah, this is called the Lorinda shawl. It's by the Webster Street Knittery, and I know that I think she's called Jen, the designer. I could be wrong. I'll pop it in the description below. But she's actually just designed a sweater version of the Lorinda shawl. So she's got a Lorinda cowl. I think there's maybe a Lorinda hat as well, all using the same stitch patterns. And she's just designed a sweater which looks amazing. It's beautiful. It's got these kind of, where is it here? Like these triangle motif and bobbles around the yoke, from what I can make out. It's not published yet because she did a shout out on Instagram yesterday looking for sample knitters. So if you're watching this today and fancy sample knit, it might be worth getting in touch with her just through Instagram to see if you want to do that. But yeah, I could not recommend the shawl enough. It's really, really lovely to knit, and it took under 2 skeins of yarn, so it's a really sizable item, and you can really kind of wrap it round, but it just took 2 skeins of fingering weight yarn, and I knit this again in our Folklore 4-ply, and yeah, loved it. It's just lovely and soft, and it blocked out really with a nice bloom. When you block particularly non-superwash yarn, it kind of has that lovely bloom to it when it's finished. So yeah, I'm very proud of my finished object. I feel like I'm kind of steaming through things. I don't know if I'm being a bit mindful of time. I think the last episode lasted for nearly an hour, and I thought, gosh, is that too long, or do I just natter too much? But I'm just going to go with the flow. You can always fast forward if you want to. So that's my one and only FO. So I'll move on to a couple of whips. I don't have tons, as you know. I don't cast on lots of different things at the same time. However, recently I've really wanted to. It's not like me at all. I find it a little bit stressful having lots of whips. It was really interesting to read your comments, everybody's comments on the last video, because there was such a big divide. You know, there's lots of people like me who maybe have one or two things, like a big thing and then a pair of socks or something like that. And then there was lots of people who was like, oh no, I cast everything on, I have all the projects, the more the merrier. And, you know, and I love that. I think that's brilliant. We're all different, aren't we? But recently, I think it's because of the time of year, there's lots of beautiful pattern releases out. We've got mystery knit-alongs going on with Stephen West. We've got new yarn launches and everything else. And I just feel like casting everything on. But I'm not. I'm going to be quite restrained, but I have got a couple of things to show you. But as I mention it, are any of you doing the Stephen West knit-along? I'm not. I never have done, actually. I've knit quite a few Stephen West shawls before, and really enjoyed them, but I'm not. I think mystery knit-alongs, I'm just too much of a chicken. Like, I'm always thinking, oh, what if I don't like it, or I can't keep up and things like that. And it's silly because I know that it's the idea is just to have fun. But lots of my friends are doing it, and I'll kind of live vicariously through them. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you're doing the Stephen West knit along this year. I think it starts next week, so that'll be interesting to see. I love watching all the pictures when they, you know, on Instagram, where it starts showing you all the clues and all the spoilers. So I'll be watching the spoilers and having a look at that. Okay, so on to my works in progress. A little bit boringly, I've got two, and then I've got one planned, so I'll show you that one as well. So first of all is a pair of socks. One of them is still on the needle, so I'll just have to be a bit careful there. I should have got a sock blocker, shouldn't I, to show you this? I didn't think. This is sock number one. In fact, if I can see one, I might grab one. Bear with me. Okay, I have sock blocker. There's no point struggling on without one when you've got one right next to you, is there? So if you don't mind bearing with for a second, I can show you this much better. Right. I've put it on a large sock blocker, which it probably should have done with a medium actually, but there we go. Okay, so this, show it a little bit better, is just a really simple ribbed sock that I've knit out of one of our autumn colourways. It's called Pumpkin Spice, and it comes in a sock set, or you can buy it on its own, you can buy the main colour on its own, but it also comes in a sock set with this sort of, it's like a light browny, coppery brown colour called Hickory. I'm not sure how well that's showing up on the screen. But Pumpkin Spice is a brand new colour for this autumn, and as you can see, it's got really kind of subtle speckles. It's quite a subtle colourway really, quite a pale background, sort of orangey toned and creamy toned, and then these kind of very subtle speckles. So I nabbed a skein for myself when these were released a few weeks ago, and knitted some socks. And I do like to sort of make up socks as I go along, and on this one you'll see it's, I think it's a 4x2 rib. And then I just did like this kind of mini cable, well, it's not really a cable, but a twist using a cable needle, just because I thought they looked a little bit like little mini pumpkins. So these little round motifs there, if that focuses in. So yeah, they're my little pumpkin socks. So I've got that one finished. And then this one, I would say I'm just under half the way through. So this is perfect TV knitting for me. I love knitting socks while I'm watching the telly on an evening. Yeah, And I had lots of comments on my last video because obviously mentioned that I knit a lot of socks, and it's probably one of my favourite things to knit. I had lots of comments asking me about how I knit my socks, what pattern I used for my husband's socks that I showed last time, which were the really big ones. You know, like how many rows did I knit and things like that. I'm more than happy to share that. What I thought I might do is do a separate little video about socks and sock knitting. And sort of specifically how I knit my socks. So I tend to do afterthought heels. So from here, I've knit already past the leg, if you see what I mean. From here, I will keep knitting a big long tube and then do my toe at the end, and then I will cut a hole in the sock and put the heel in, which sounds terrifying, but it isn't. So I do what we call a true afterthought heel, and that fits me and fits the shape of my foot really, really well. It's not for everybody, I totally get that. And my second favourite heel is this kind of classic heel turn and gusset. So I can and do both depending on what kind of mood I'm in. So I thought I might do a little video just about sock knitting, because I had lots of comments from people who are quite keen to know, you know, what I do or how I made my husband's socks, for example. Maybe you're looking to knit for your husband or a member of the family who've got different size feet, but also from people who haven't maybe knit socks yet. And honestly, they are the simplest things. Once you know what you're doing, once you've got the hang of it, you will sail away with them and you'll really love it. They're really enjoyable and I think quite addictive. So I thought I might do a little video just about sock knitting, and I'll focus on like the afterthought heel, but also just do some little hints and tips that you pick up along the way. And for some of you, you absolutely won't need that, because I know there's some absolute master sock knitters there amongst you. But for those of you who are maybe looking to start, or even just having a bit of a nosy about how other people do theirs, then yeah, so I thought I might do that as my next video. Let me know in the comments if you think that that would be something you'd be interested in, and if there's anything in particular that you would like me to include in that video. I don't know, like type of yarn or size of needles, or, you know, anything, whatever it might be. If there's anything in particular that you're wondering about, just pop it in the comments and I'll pick it up. And then hopefully, probably, you know, later this month on November, I'll do a bit of a sock knitting video. So yeah, those are my pumpkin spice socks. Now, I'm also doing this, I should mention, I also cast these on because there is an autumn leaves, I think I've said that right, I might be wrong, autumn leaves or fall leaves sock knit along at the moment, and it's been hosted by Denise from who is Earth Tones Girl. So she has a podcast too, but also is on Instagram, and you know, as her name implies, she loves earth toned yarn. I think she's amazing, so do I, all sort of natural and earthy tones. But she hosts an annual knit along. I think it finishes in November. I might be completely off-piste here, but yeah, it's a sock knit along. So this is my contribution, and I'm hoping to get these finished. And to be honest, I never take knit alongs too seriously. I know often there's I don't know if this one has a prize or not, but often there's prizes associated with it, or there's a deadline associated with it. And to be honest, I just go into it for fun. And if I finish it, I finish it. If I don't, I don't. But it's nice to feel like a part of something for a little time, isn't it? And I like kind of looking at the hashtag on Instagram and seeing what other people are making. Get loads of ideas for sock patterns and stuff just by looking at the hashtags on these types of things. So yeah, that's my contribution. Right, I felt sure that I had something else, another work in progress to show you. So I feel like a bit of a phony because I only have one more. But I think the FO kind of, you know, takes the edge off, doesn't it? I deserve a bit of a round of applause for finishing something, I think. But I did think I'd cast something else on, and I can't find it, and I can't think what it would be. But I have cast on a crochet project, so bear with me. There it is. And it is Granny Stripe Blanket. Hold that a bit closer. In fact, that's upside down. There we go. So getting a little bit, it's very sort of muted colours, that I'm using, but it's a little bit washed out on the screen. It's really bad weather here. It's absolutely chucking it down outside. So all the colours are a little bit more muted than they might be. But yes, check me out with my crochet project. So this is it in its full length. And I only cast this on the day before yesterday, Wednesday. So I'm quite pleased with how far I've got with it, to be honest. And that's because it's really addictive. So in the last video I chatted a little bit about crochet, and it had been ages since I'd crocheted anything. And I just really fancied it. And I saw, I don't know if you follow her on Instagram, Green Letter Day. So she's called Bonnie, the lady who runs that. And she does kits. She dyes yarn and she does sort of kits for predominantly crochet blanket projects. She always comes up with really, really beautiful colour palettes, and I enjoy looking at those. But she showed a blanket recently, and it was a granny stripe, and she'd alternated brighter colours with a neutral, and I can't remember if it was cream or if it was grey, but that's where I got the idea from. So I kind of pinched it from her, to be honest with you, and I have seen other people do it as well. But do check Bonnie out, because I really like her. She sort of designs more complex crochet blankets as well. So if you're into crochet, I'm sure that you already know who she is. But yeah, I was really inspired by her granny stripe, and I decided to cast this on. So I've done a granny stripe blanket before, and it's a bit of a tale of woe really. So I started it when it was all the rage. Don't know if you remember. I mean, it still is a little bit. People are still doing the 4-ply sock yarn, scrappy granny stripe blankets. I must have cast it on 5, maybe even 6 years ago now, and it took me a good 18 months to finish it, because crocheting or knitting a blanket out of 4-ply yarn is, you know, you're asking for trouble really, aren't you? And I decided that I wanted to do one that fit over my bed. So it's massive. It's like a king size blanket. So it took me a very, very long time. And when I finished it, I was so ecstatic, and I took photos of my little boy, who was much, much younger then. He probably was 3 or 4, and I had like pictures of him and his friends hiding under it, and they were using it as a fort and all the rest of it. And it's lovely, really bright colours, and everything just chosen completely randomly, all different scraps, different yarn dyers, you know, commercial yarn and all sorts. And it was a lot of fun. However, the years have taken their toll on this poor blanket, and it's now got massive holes in it, 3 or 4 massive holes in it. And it's not the first time. So I've fixed this blanket, or tried my best to fix it, and sewn it up at least 2 or 3 times in the past, and had to kind of spread it all out on the floor and go in and sew it up. And I'm sure there are easier ways to fix, or proper ways to fix crochet when it's got a rip in it. But I couldn't find, like, because for example, one of the stitches here, if that's come undone, or say that bottom one had come undone, how you then, I'm not explaining it very well, how you then kind of get back into the stitches and crochet them back together. And I couldn't work it out, so I just sewed them using yarn, but I kind of sewed it back together, and it lasted for a while. But as I said, it's ripped again, and it's probably down to, you know, it's had a lot of use. You know, like I'd mentioned, my son had been using it. It's always been on his bed, and he's probably kicked holes in it, and I don't mind that, you know, that's what kids are for. But I also think it's because I used the magic knot all the way through. So when I was putting in my scraps of yarn, rather than joining them and sewing in the ends, I magic knotted them, which again, lots and lots of people do, and maybe they don't have the same problem that I had. But in lots of cases, those knots just came undone later on. So it was a tale of woe, because if you put like 18 months or 2 years of your life into working on something, and then it develops these massive holes, you know, I was a little bit heartbroken. So I kind of put crochet aside for a little bit, because I didn't want to go down that route again. But even though I keep seeing people with these lovely blanket projects, and I could have done like a granny square project or hexagon project, but the thought of having to sew them all in, even if I know there's ways of sewing them as you go, you know, but the thought of doing that just really put me off, to be honest. Anyway, so the point I'm getting to is, it took me a while to drum up the courage to start a new one. And how I'm trying to combat the holes this time is, number one, I'm doing it in DK. So not only will it go hopefully a lot faster and be finished a lot quicker, but it already feels a little bit sturdier than the 4-ply version. And the second thing I'm doing, as you can tell, is I am properly starting and finishing my yarns. So and these will be ends that I will need to weave in, and I will curse till the air is blue when I have to weave them in, I'm sure. But I just would prefer to do that than risk having any more holes from the magic knots. So yeah, this is what we're doing. And how I kind of, what also inspired me is I've got a colourway called Crema. I'm just looking around me to see if I have any. There's one. Anyone would think I was almost prepared, wouldn't you? But this is the colour I'm using. It's called Crema, and you would be forgiven for thinking, looking at that on the screen and thinking, oh, it's undyed wool. But it isn't, it is dyed. And if I was to hold up an undyed skein, which I definitely don't have in this room, you would see quite a big difference, because undyed merino yarn is really quite a stark white colour. It depends where you get it from and what yarn base it is, of course, but it's quite a stark white, and this is a lovely, lovely, lovely soft cream. In fact, it's the cream of rice pudding. That's what it is. And it makes me hungry. But I've loved this, and I've been dyeing it a lot recently because it goes with lots of colours, but it goes with our autumnal colours really, really well. Just to prove, this is foxtails and this is Crema together. Don't they look nice? So it goes well with a lot of the autumnal colours. So I've been dyeing it quite a lot, and hence it was in my mind, and I thought, oh, I'd really like that in a blanket. So I'm using, this is the main colour, so this is all on every single alternate row, and I'll probably use it for the sashing around the outside as well. And then for the stripes, the colour stripes, I am using all, here they are, look. These are all test colours. So when I do a new collection or a new range of yarn, I always do like a test batch first, and sometimes that test batch is 100% how I wanted it and how I envisaged it, and sometimes it isn't, you know, and I put it aside or I develop the colour, whatever, you know what I mean. I'm sure you've all done similar. So this one became yellow, Mellow Ochre is the colourway name, and it is Mellow Ochre, but it happens to be the test skein that I did of it. And this is a test colour that never saw the light of day, and I called it Marilyn when I was doing it. But I've actually done quite a few Marilyn Monroe themed or inspired yarns this year. I absolutely love Marilyn Monroe. I'll talk more about that another time. But yeah, I adore her, and I just was trying to capture a particular pink outfit that she had, and I think I did, but this colour didn't fit with the range I was developing. It just didn't, it was too bright, and also I do have other pinks, but I love this. So I'm rambling. These are the colours that I'm using. And it's such a brilliant way to use up skeins that have been sat on my shelf for some time, because I would never sell them. And the reason is, well, is because I obviously have yarn bases that I use in my shop, and I always use the same yarn base. So if you buy Audrey classic sock, it will always be from the same supplier, from the same mill. Occasionally we might run out of a particular bit, you know, it's very, very rare, but during lockdown, for example, and you know, the supply chain was very disrupted, we might run out of a particular base, so I might try another one. So I might try another supplier's 75-25 merino, and I didn't like it as much, which, you know, absolutely understandable. So what I did is I kept that, and I kept that small batch that I bought for my sample dyes, because I know it's the same fibre content and is going to take the dye very, very similarly, but it's not something that I would put in the shop. It's got a different meterage, it's got a different feel to it. So yeah, so I have, you know, 10, a dozen, 20 of these kind of test skeins, and I used that yarn for it, and it's just been sat there. So I thought this was a really good way. Now they're all 4-ply these, so I'm having to hold these double as I crochet it, but I don't think you can tell at all. So the cream is double knit, and everything else is 4-ply held double, and I honestly don't think you can tell. There's no difference in the depth of stitch or anything like that. It's worked out really well. So yeah, that's what I'm going to be working on tonight, because it's one of these projects that the moment you put it down, because you have to work, oh my god, you know, you have to do something other than knit or crochet, you just can't wait. You're itching to get back to it. So I'm really, really itching to start. And these are some of the other colours that I'm looking to put in. I love pinks. I've got pinks, and I've kind of just ended on a terracotta, and then I've got some like little greens to go in as well. And I think the beauty of alternating it with the neutral is that none of the colours are next to each other directly, and it doesn't really matter, you know, it doesn't matter so much. They don't have to fade. God, I'm so bored of fades, I have to say. They don't have to fade, they don't have to match perfectly. It's just kind of winging it as I go along, really. So yeah, that's my crochet blanket, and I might drop in the description bar how I've made it, the size and everything, but I can tell you the pattern I've used is, and many of you will be familiar with Lucy from Attic 24 and have probably made them yourself lots and lots of times. So I'm using the Granny Stripe Blanket by Lucy of Attic 24. So if you want to just Google that, Attic 24, you will find she's got a whole web page or blog, goes into loads and loads and loads of detail about how, you know, the size and how to turn the corners and how to change your colours, and it's just perfect for beginners as well. So that's what I'm using, and I cast on 199. So you do foundation chain. I chained 199 stitches, and it's obviously made quite, so that's, I'm holding that in doubled up now, so it's made a sizable blanket, put it that way. So yeah, that's currently what I'm working on. I'm really, really enjoying that. I'm definitely going to finish my socks as well though, so probably work a bit on those this evening, and then crack on with my blanket. And I did mention I have another project planned. Well, I've got millions of projects planned, to be honest. But one of the kind of immediate ones, if you just bear with me again for 1 second. Just hum to yourselves. Sorry, just not very prepared, am I? Yeah, so these mini skeins, I did share these on Instagram, I think, maybe a couple of weeks ago. They've just been sat on the shelf in my room. So when I do like a yarn club, I always do a tonal yarn with it. And over time, you know, and I always have a couple of spare, and over time they just kind of, you know, accumulate on these stacks. And it just so happens that the last kind of 4 have just looked really nice together. And they've been winking at me in the corner of the room. So I really want to do some socks with these, and do some sort of stripy socks. And I did actually, full disclosure, I did actually cast some on. I don't have them to hand, or I would show them, but I didn't like them. And I'd done a sort of stripy sock with a slip stitch every few stitches, what have you, and I just wasn't that keen. So I'm gonna frog those and start again and just do some kind of plain stripes or colour blocks, I think, with these kind of nice little autumnal colours. So that's going to be a project very soon. So hopefully next time I do a podcast, you'll be able to see those. In fact, if I do my video on socks, then maybe I'll use those as the example. So yeah, those are all my whips at the moment. Classic 2 whip story. Probably never going to be any more than that realistically. And I did promise some stash enhancements. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you some bits, and there isn't very much, but some bits that I've got recently. And then I'm going to show you some lovely things that I have for the shop. So I mentioned quite a lot in the last podcast about not bombarding you with shop stuff. You know, I don't want this to be a salesy podcast at all. Hopefully it isn't. But I did have lots of people saying, we'd like to see more yarn, we'd like to see more yarn. So I will show you a little bit of the yarn coming in the update this weekend at the end. But what I most want to show you are some of the other things coming to the shop made by other makers. So if you remember at the end of my last podcast, I mentioned expanding the shop and wanting to kind of set up a marketplace and introduce some new handmade items from local makers, and I have a couple of those with me today. So that's what I really want to show you. And if you're not interested in that or what's in the shop, then if I do it towards the end of the podcast, then that's fine. You can just take that or leave that bit, can't you? You can fast forward it. So first things first, I mentioned being at Yarndale last weekend, and I had no time at all to walk around. My mum, bless her, she always comes with me to shows, and she's just brilliant help, and helps me on the stall. But it was so busy, which I'm immensely thankful for. I didn't get a chance to walk around and have a good look around like I normally would at a show. But my mum bought me the most beautiful project bag, which I don't have because it's at her house. So I want to mention it, and next video I will definitely show you it. It's by a lady called Jocelyn. I'm just looking down to make sure I get her business name right. Soft Accents UK. So she's on Instagram, and she makes the most beautiful project bags and toiletry bags, you know, kind of waterproof bags, all different shapes and sizes, out of really beautiful African fabric. Some of it's out of kind of African print, and some of it's out of retro kind of 1960s, 70s fabric, which is like absolutely, you know, my vibe as well. So yeah, my mum bought me a beautiful African fabric sock bag. But as I said, it's at my mum's house, so I can't show you that. So I know I'm tantalising you with that information, but I promise I will show you it next time. But in the meantime, do go and check out Soft Accents, because she's got some really beautiful and unique things. And I did toddle along to her stall because my mum came back and said, "Oh, I've just seen this beautiful stall, you will love it." And I did go and have a chat with her and have a look at the bags there. So yeah, it was really, really nice. So the things that I bought myself from Yarndale are very limited, but I did pick up this sock yarn. So every year at Yarndale they do they do collab with West Yorkshire Spinners. So I'm trying to make you dizzy. West Yorkshire Spinners, who make delightful British wool sock yarn, and they do different stripes every year. So they usually have, I don't know, 5 or 6 different balls of yarn that you can get. And this is the one I chose. It's 75% wool, 25% nylon, but of that wool it is 35% Blueface Leicester, which if you are a sock knitter you know is a really sturdy, really lovely sturdy wool for socks, but also extremely soft. So yeah, I treated myself and I got this lovely flumpy little ball of stripe yarn, and the colours aren't coming up amazingly there, but it's got some grey in it, and I really liked that. When they had some samples knit up, and the grey stripe in it just looked really nice. So I will be getting on with these quite soon, I think. I really like those. So that was purchase number 1. And then also from the Yarndale stall, I got these lovely cards, and I just have to share them. So it says screen printed on recycled card by Caroline Rerry. So that's the designer's name. So I don't know, as I said, they were on the Yarndale stall, as in, you know, the festival holders stall. I don't know if Caroline is associated with Yarndale or if it was just something beautiful that they brought along to have on their stall, but they had loads of these and it was really hard to choose. So they're all kind of folk prints, real sort of stylised. So there's a sun, flower, reminds me a bit of Hornsey pottery, and then a moon. So I got 4. They're just plain greeting cards. I'm going to frame them and put them in my office, I think. But they had loads of different ones, and honestly I could have bought one of each. They're just so lovely and very, very me. Very, very my vibe. So yeah, I thought I'd just show you those because it's something a little bit different. I didn't buy any of the yarn, just the sock yarn. Like I said, I didn't have time to get around. So to all intents and purposes, it's probably a little bit of a boring haul, really, isn't it? But I really love those items. And then I did have a kind of a new acquisition I wanted to show you through the post. So I've got no cross stitch to show you this week. I haven't actually done any cross stitch since the last video. And if you remember in the last video, I was talking about my eyes and not being able to see very well when I'm wearing my glasses on an evening and not being able to see up close. And so many of you put some really helpful comments on that video. So if you struggle with something in a similar vein, do go and have a read. And I will try and round up some of the advice, but there's all sorts of good advice on there. But several of you recommended different products as well. And one lady, I'm so sorry, I can't remember your name at the moment, but you came up to me at Yarndale as well and actually sent me a link to the lamp that you have, and it's available on Amazon. That's Amazon UK. I'm sure the same one's available elsewhere. And I have ordered it. Yes. And it's just a kind of angle poise lamp. It clips onto the table, and I've got a little table next to where I sit on an evening, and it clips onto that. And I'm hoping that having a decent daylight lamp will make the world of difference, and I'll be able to do some stitching again. So that's an almost acquisition. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'll be sure to let you know how I find that when it does. And then in the meantime, because I haven't done any cross stitch, I have actually bought another cross stitch pattern. So this is another one by Plum Street Samplers. So if you remember last time I had the lovely pumpkin-y one, that was also by them. This one is called Harvest Keeper, and it's a beekeeper, very autumnal colours, and she's got a lovely, I don't know if she's a witch, but she's got a lovely witch-like hat on. And it's just got that same kind of like New England, to me, this is how I think of it anyway, New England type colour and vibe to it. So yeah, I really, really like that. It's gonna sit in my cupboard for a long time because I want to finish the other things that I'm working on. But I just really like that and I wanted to share it. So yeah, that's one of my acquisitions this month. Okay, so just mindful of time, what I wanted to spend the last few minutes doing was just to show you a couple of bits that's going to be in the shop, and also have a little chat about things that I've been enjoying this month. I think somebody might have written that in the comments and said, oh, I'd love to hear, you know, what are you reading, blah, blah, blah. And to me, what I'm enjoying book-wise or watching a film or something like that is really, really related to what I'm doing either in the dye studio or with my knitting. Because when I'm knitting, when I'm watching TV or watching a film on an evening, I'm always knitting. And therefore, you know, a project like this will have lots of memories of films that I've watched knit into it. I don't know if any of you guys are like that as well. But also, you know, if I'm reading a book or something like that, the colours and all that kind of imagery goes into what I'm doing at work. So to me, they're all kind of intertwined. And because I've been working on the Coven box this month, I've been watching and reading lots of witchy stuff, and I thought I'd just mention that at the end. So there's going to be a little bit of like what I'm into. But first, shop. So these, I've got some ceramics to show you. So these are by a lovely lady called Katie Parker Potts. She's an English ceramicist. You'll find her on Instagram. And these are little hanging decorations. Not doing a great job of showing you them, am I? Little pumpkins. So there's one that says trick or treat and one that's got a little jack-o'-lantern face. And they're so lovely and so neat. And then there's also a little plain pumpkin too. So I've got a bit of a pumpkin theme to this shop update this weekend. And Katie, bless her, got these ready just in time for me to launch this weekend in my pumpkin shop update. So these are lovely, and I don't know whether they're going to be in little sets, maybe sets of 2 or individually, but they're just perfect for Halloween. You could hang them from a mantelpiece, you could hang them if you have like little branches in your home, like pussy willow or something like that. I know that's more for spring, but you get what I mean. And yeah, lovely little decorations. So seasonal. And Katie's going to be, or is making, lots of other items for the shop as well, and they'll be coming soon. So we'll just have the pumpkins this weekend, and then later in the year we'll have some other kind of wintry things and some knitting related things. So some little notions bowls, which are absolutely beautiful. I have some already. So yeah, that's Katie Parker Potts. So she's an inaugural member of our marketplace. I'm super excited about that and just really wanted to share. And the second member is Berwick Botanicals. So these are handmade soaps, and these will be going into the shop on Sunday as well. And these are handmade in Berwick upon Tweed, which is very far north of England, a couple of hours from me. I holiday near there every year, so it feels very local to me, even though it isn't quite. And they're made by a lovely lady called Grace and her mum, and they've got a really cute little cabin that they hand make all their soap bars in. And they also grow all of their botanicals. So they've not only made the natural soaps, but they've actually grown the ingredients, and I just think that's absolutely amazing. I absolutely love it. So I first bought these for myself early in the year. I bought a little gift box, which I'll show you in a second, and I've been steadily using them all year. And yeah, I reached out to Grace to see if she would be interested in doing some wholesale for Beehive yarns, and she said yeah, absolutely. So we've got several flavours. So this one in my hand is sea buckthorn and tangerine, and I only wish it was smell-o-vision because it's absolutely gorgeous. They're all very ecologically packaged. They keep for, I think she said, up to 12 months in the packaging, so you know, perfect for gifts and things like this. We're going to have a set of 4 flavours, and one of those, and I thought I'd picked that up, hence showing you it, but one of them is pumpkin spice flavour. So that's another of my pumpkins for the weekend. So they'll be in the shop, and then we'll have the individual bars like that, which I think they're 100 grams each. And then we've got these gift boxes where you get 4 different flavours to try. And this is what I first got early in the year. And they last for ages, even though they're only 50 gram each. And they're perfect for guests or just for trying different flavours. So we've got eucalyptus and pine. Oh, it smells like Christmas. Rosehip and lemon verbena. And blossom honey and lavender. And they're gorgeous. And the best thing about them, of course, is entirely handmade and very, very local. So thank you so much, Grace, for those. And yeah, I'm looking forward to getting those in the shop to show you. So those are my 2 first marketplace peeps, which I'm very excited about. And they've both got pumpkin-y stories this week. And just to add to that, I've been making some pumpkins too. So we've got some little stitch markers. These all sold out a little while ago, but I've got some more in. Hopefully that will focus a little bit. Sets of, I know it's not particularly great. There we go. Sets of 3 little stitch markers, and I'll just take one off actually to show you. We've got little pumpkins, but the clasp, it's actually an earring clasp, and you can use it, it's round, so you can use it as a stitch marker with knitting, so beginning of round marker, what have you, but because it opens, you can also use it as a progress keeper or use it as a crochet stitch marker as well, because you can open it up. So they're really kind of, I think, really handy. And when I was at Yarndale, I had these. I'll have these in the sets of 3, and I'm going to have some orange ones which are individual. And I had the little orange ones at Yarndale, and Hannah from the Corner of Craft, I'm sure you might watch her as well, she's fantastic. She bought some and she wore them as earrings because they are earring clasps. So there you go, multi-use, which is very nice. So those are my kind of pumpkin contribution to our pumpkin patch update. Little pumpkin stitch markers. And as I showed you on my socks, we've also got, bear with me, we've also got these pumpkin spice little sock sets that are going into. So because it's post Yarndale, post show, we've got like a whole mixture of different yarns going in the shop. At the moment there's absolutely nothing in the shop yarn wise. We've got some mini skeins, we've got all sorts of bits, but we've particularly got autumnal shades, which I think is what everybody wants at the moment, isn't it? So we've got lots of browns and natural kind of shades. I'll just choose 3 to show you to hold up. So I've shown you some wool without dwelling too much on it. I do apologise to keep going off camera. I'm not really, you know, I could try and edit them, couldn't I? But I'm not sure that I'm going to get around to doing that. Okay, so this is Dryad. This is on DK, but we'll have it on other bases as well. This is a sort of speckled green and, what would you say, burnt orange yarn, and it's got sort of blue speckles. Very kind of woodlandy, I think, hence the name. So that's Dryad. We've got oatmeal, and this is a super neutral base, like a very pale taupe, and then it's got quite delicate speckles of burnt orange, brown, and like a chartreuse green, and it knits up into quite a subtle but speckly colour. So we'll have this in individual skeins on DK and 4-ply, and also some sock sets as well. And then another colourway in the shop this week is Burnt Umber. So I was wearing in the last episode my Salty Air tee, which is knit out of Burnt Umber. And we've got some more of this heading into the shop this week as well on various different bases. So there's just 3 there to show you of our kind of autumnal yarns. I didn't want to go overboard. But dyeing colourways like this at the moment, and I'm also wearing one, this is called Maple, this colourway. But wearing and sort of dyeing all the autumnal colours at the moment just gives me all the cosy feels, and it's definitely my favourite time of the year. And some other cosy things that I've been into recently. As I said, I've been making coven boxes. So that was almost blinkered for many months during the summer, making the coven witchy boxes. And I won't give any spoilers away in terms of the colours inside, although I know some people have already opened them. Naughty ladies. But yeah, it was a lot of fun kind of putting those together. And bit of a kind of warning, if you have bought the coven box, inside, I'm not giving anything away here, but inside I've put some pattern suggestions for the yarn, and also some film and book recommendations for witchy films and things like that. Now, I have mentioned before, but I watch a lot of horror films, and some of the film suggestions I've put in the coven box are really quite grim. They're quite extreme, and it just didn't occur to me. I was like typing away, Hereditary. I can't remember what else I put in there. I definitely put Hereditary down, and I put yeah, some others. And after I got it printed, I was showing my husband, oh, you know, do you like this? And he was just like, you know, that's quite an extreme film. Maybe some people won't like it, you know. And you've also put The Worst Witch, which is a kids' film. You know, people might think that they're all going to be like that, hocus pocus, you know, but they're not. So I'm just, by word of warning, don't just take my word for it that you will enjoy the film. Do a little bit of research first. So there's things on there like practical magic. We all like practical magic, don't we? I'm sure. But some of the other ones, you know, maybe just do a little bit of research before you watch it if you don't like horror. I'm not trying to be condescending at all. You're very, very capable of making your own film choices. But I just didn't want anybody sitting down and watching one of these films thinking it was going to be like a nice little witchy film, and actually it's really pretty grim. So, yeah. So, anyway, in preparation for that, of course, I've been watching lots of witchy films and doing stuff like that. And I also put some book recommendations in the coven box as well. And one of the books that I read myself, I only put books that I read, is called The Witches of New York. And I can't remember the author, so I'll put it in the description bar rather than try and butcher anything now. But The Witches of New York. Now, I like anything witchy, right from The Worst Witch to Hereditary and everything in between. It's just a kind of a genre that I like. But this book, I didn't really like it. So I've recommended it because I think it's an interesting read. If, like me, you also love witchy things, you will like it. It starts off nice. It's set in I want to say Victorian times, but obviously in New York, so the equivalent late 19th century. And it's set in a tea shop, which is just beautiful. And the descriptions of the tea shop and the 2 ladies who run it are lovely. But it very quickly, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything here, it very quickly veers off into clairvoyancy. And the majority of the story, at least in my opinion, then goes into speaking with ghosts and contacting dead people. None of which I have anything particularly against, but it just doesn't interest me. And that to me isn't witchcraft. It's very kind of evocative of the late 19th century, when those things were very fashionable, when seances were, you know, in high society were a really big thing. So it's interesting in that context, but it wasn't the book that I thought it was going to be, which I thought it was going to be more about, you know, spells, spell work and things like that. So yeah, I'm glad I read it, and I certainly would recommend it to people who are interested in what I've just described, but it wasn't my favourite. So yeah, I thought I'd mention that because I just like sharing stuff like this. And then the next book I read, so straight hot off the heels off that one, was a book that I didn't think I would ever read, but it's called A Discovery of Witches. And again, you may have heard of that. It's a TV series as well. They made of it, and I've seen the TV series, and I did like it. I really enjoyed it. It's about a world where there are witches, vampires, and demons living amongst, you know, hidden in plain sight, and yeah, all the kind of complexities around that. And I really enjoy the TV series. I think it's kind of quite highly acclaimed for, you know, what it is, which is a bit of fun, isn't it? It's not serious in any shape. And it also involves time travel, and I'm really big into history, but particularly Elizabethan and Tudor history, and it goes back to Elizabethan times. And yeah, it's nice. It's a nice bit of fun. And I kind of thought, well, I've seen the TV. I'm probably not going to read it. Full disclosure, I can be a bit of a book snob. I've said it. I'm not proud of that fact. I love reading like classical literature. I like a lot of American novels, but I don't read a lot of genre books until maybe the last 18 months, where I've read loads. You know, I've read A Court of Thorn and Roses and all the following ones after it, even though I think they're laughable. I loved them, and you know, I enjoyed them, and I've read them all. So I am pleased, don't get me wrong, I'm trying not to be a snob here, but I can be, you know, I'm just being honest. But I've done a massive U-turn, and like I said, the last 18 months I've read a lot more kind of genre books, and I would put A Discovery of Witches in that class. It's not, you know, it's not high literature, is it? But it is a bit of fun. I didn't think I'd ever read it because I already knew the story from TV, but I did. I read it. I actually saw it on the shelf in when I was on holiday in the summer. In Northumberland, there's a town called Alnwick. I'm going off on a massive tangent here. But there's a town called Alnwick, which is where some of the Harry Potter films are filmed, around the castle. It's got a beautiful big castle, but it's also very, very famous for having this massive secondhand bookshop. And yes, I went there and I saw Discovery of Witches on the shelf, and I thought, do you know what, I'm gonna read that. So yeah, I did, and do you know what, I loved it. I thought it was brilliant, and I only read the first book. It's a part of a trilogy. I've only read the first book so far, but I really, really enjoyed it. And I think it's because I love vampires. I'd love to marry a vampire. I mean, is there anything sexier than a vampire? I don't think there is. And that kind of age-old story, you know, of vampire and witch, da 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 da. And I really liked it, much more than I was expecting to. So I'd recommend that if you haven't read it and if you're into that kind of thing. And the other thing that occurred to me while I was reading it is it literally is the same story as Twilight. But just in a slightly more grown-up sense. But it's all about, you know, vampire falling in love. In this context, it's a vampire and a witch, not a vampire and a human. But it's about their kind of star-crossed love, and, you know, they have something, you know, it's not ordinary. They're not ordinary people, you know, they are the most powerful people. And when they have, you know, when they come together and when they have offspring, they are the most powerful. It's just a really kind of, it struck me as really, really similar, but it's a lot of fun. So I quite liked that. And as we're moving into, you know, Halloween very, 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 very soon, I thought I would mention what I've been reading. And then as a very final kind of what I've been up to and what I've been enjoying, I mentioned when I'm knitting, you know, I always remember what I've been watching while I've been knitting something. And this shawl all the way through making this shawl. My husband and I watched Hammer TV series. So I'm sure you've all heard of Hammer horror, which are the kind of typically 1960s, 70s, really quite cheesy horror films. There's some scary ones too, and they do make. There are modern contemporary Hammer horror films. It still exists as a studio. But most famous probably for the Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing movies of the 60s and 70s. And I really like those. But this was the TV show, and it was released in 1980, and it's very, very much of its time. You know, stylistically, thematically, is really like late 70s, early 80s. And we just absolutely loved it. And they only ever made one series of it. If you can get hold of it, we have the DVD of it. I would recommend it if you're into that kind of thing. Not because they're particularly horror. They're not horror. They're not scary. They're more like Tales of the Unexpected, if you've ever seen that. Kind of quirky stories, one-off stories, all set in the UK. Very, like I said, evocative of the time. And yeah, quite folky in a way. Yeah, just interesting. And they've got some famous actors popping up, you know, who you wouldn't expect to see on TV shows of the era. They've subsequently become more famous perhaps, and they're kind of popping up in there. So yeah, really, really enjoyed that. So that's one to look out for if you're into that kind of retro stuff like that. And then bringing it more up to date, what I'm watching at the moment and really, really enjoying is The Serpent Queen, which is, we're only on episode 3, you know, it kind of comes out one a week, so I can't binge it, which is a shame. But it's a series about Catherine de Medici, and it's brilliant. Like I'm a massive fan. I studied history at university. I studied medieval history actually, but I love Tudor history and the contemporaries of that period, and which this is. It's set in France in the same period, and there's a lot of kind of Tudor-ish TV shows around, aren't there? And some of them are absolute drivel and some of them are great. And this is done really, really well. It's not without wit, you know, it's still funny, and it breaks the fourth wall occasionally. She'll look directly at the camera. But it's serious, you know, it's not like The Tudors, if you ever watched The Tudors, which by the way I absolutely love. It's not that. It's not kind of like anachronistic costumes and things like that. It's done really well. But the lead actresses in it, so I know I'm blabbering on, but the lead actresses in it are just phenomenal. So Catherine de Medici, it's told in flashback. So you meet her as she was, I guess, in her middle age, and she's played by Samantha Morton, who's a really famous English actress. She's done lots of kind of period costume dramas, and a really, really fantastic actress. So she's kind of relaying the story to her maid of when she was younger, and the actress who plays Catherine de Medici when she was younger is just amazing. She's a complete breath of fresh air. You know, when you can't take your eyes off somebody, they're, I don't know, just kind of different in the way that they're relating, and she's just a really, really good actress, and I think just makes the series brilliant. So if you're into history, I highly recommend The Serpent Queen. It's just a really enjoyable watch, and I'll look forward to watching the rest of the series whilst I'm working on these projects here. So yeah, that kind of brings me to the end really. I've gone way over an hour this week. I wasn't going to blather on quite so long, but hopefully some of you have stayed around till the end. I'll leave it here, and just wish you all a very, very happy October. Hopefully I'll be back a little bit sooner next time. I might do my socks video next, so don't forget to leave me a comment below if that's something you'd be interested in, or if there's anything in particular you'd like to see. Or indeed if there's any other ideas for videos or topics that you'd like to see in the future. But yeah, thank you so much for hanging around this time, and yeah, I hope you have a lovely week ahead. So